Those stuck offshore are finally getting something, but not quite yet. We have partners getting protection at a cost, or is it just political spin? And why are the 2021 residence visas taking so long for some people? We're going to cover all of that in today's video. But first, this video is not legal advice, it's our commentary on immigration here in New Zealand. If you want legal advice, please contact me. My email address is in the description down below. First, we're going to look at the post-study work visa holders who were caught offshore at the start at the pandemic and the border closed. Now, earlier in February, Immigration New Zealand sent around an email to people who had been caught offshore with the post-study work visa. I'm sure many of you would have seen that email, whether you received it or you saw it on one of the many posts online, and were likely confused by it. Now, whoever writes these emails can make them very unclear. I don't know why they're written in this way, but it's just so common that we see so many issues with how these things are worded. For those of you who received the email and were confused, you weren't really alone. I've got a shot here of the email that did go out there. Now, the first issue is that very first line where it says, "You have been granted an open work visa." But that isn't quite true, as people who checked with Immigration New Zealand found there had been no visa yet granted. They were still visa-less. It then says that the Administration of Immigration has granted open work visas. Again, that's not quite true. What had happened is the Minister had said these people would be granted work visas, but the visas themselves still do not exist. These were sort of, you'll get it in the future. They have not been granted yet. So in my view, if you can't travel on a visa, you haven't got that visa yet. So the opening line really should have said, you will be granted an open work visa and you will be granted this by 30 March 2023. So whoever wrote this has worded it in a way that we just find isn't clear, especially to those of you who have English as a second language. It could have been much, much clearer and a lot more useful to so many of you out there. So for those of you who did receive this email, you should be granted your visa by 30 March 2023. Those of you who didn't get the email but you think you should have, you may get that visa granted. You may have to go to immigration and ask them about it. Email is not a perfect system, especially when it comes to Immigration New Zealand. So you may still be getting it even without the email. Definitely you might need to get someone to look into that for you. If you have a new passport, you'll be able to transfer this across to the new passport once you get the new visa. The visa itself hasn't been granted yet. When it is granted, you will have between 30 March and 29 September to enter into the country before that 12-month period starts. So you can use that time to transfer to the new passport and then enter the country for, to come here and work. But please don't try to travel on this until you've actually got the visa. Right now, you cannot travel on this. This is just an email. It is not actually a visa that has been granted. It is the future visa that should be granted in the future. It hasn't been provided now. Okay. Now we have a look at the most substantial thing we've seen recently when it comes to immigration. It has been a fairly sort of quiet few months, and that of course is the announcement around changes earlier this week as to the handling of partnership work visas. Now this is not for those who are partners of citizens or residents. That is different. This is for partners of work visa holders. I did want to get this video out earlier this week when we saw this announcement. The announcement came through a couple of days ago. But even as an experienced lawyer who has argued things in court and is pretty good with the English language, I really had difficulty understanding the mess of words that Immigration New Zealand released. Again, this was so poorly worded. This just didn't make sense. I went through it with some of my staff, also a lawyer, and again, different interpretations. We weren't sort of quite clear as to what they were actually talking about in this. Fortunately, so this is I'll bring up the email now. This was the one that we received, and it's from an immigration website. And it talks about sort of the requirements and the changes they are making. Now, there was also a press release from the government for the Beehive website, which definitely did help make it a little bit clearer. We're going to sort of just bring up that now. We will link to these in the descriptions down below. Let's just reload that. It's timed out. And this helped now clarify how this is going to be working. It's still not 100% exact. We'll get the official rules in May. So right now, this is our interpretation of what is some poorly drafted wording that isn't actually that clear. Okay, so we'll look at through here. It does put a political spin on things, and that's one that does concern me a little bit. It's the whole thing about strengthened protection and improved process for partners of migrant workers, as if this was a positive for migrants. In reality, it probably isn't. We're going to sort of show you why that does seem like a little bit like political spin. Now, the government has wanted to stop most partners of workers from getting open work visas for some time. This has been planned for a while. This was originally announced last year, then it was delayed until April 2023. And now we're seeing this. And the reason behind that was that they felt that there was a lot of jobs which Kiwis could be doing that would be taken up by those on open work visas who are partners of work visa holders. Now, from the mess that is written in the communication, and this is a little bit clearer, our interpretation is that partnership work visa holders who apply from 31 May will contain a condition. So when they get the visa, there'll be a new condition on their visa requiring that the partner can only work for accredited employers and must be paid at least the median wage, being $29.66 now. The government said this is to do with threatening protections, a similar argument they use for the accredited employer work visa scheme that's there to protect migrants from exploitation. Something that we would agree with if that was really the purpose. The issue is that the partners of high earners, so those earning double the median salary, or the partners of those who are on the green list, won't have the same requirement applied on them. So they won't have to have a job. They won't have to be paid for a job at the median salary or have an accredited employer. They can go work for anybody as long as they pay at least the median wage. So if it's about protecting migrants, it would appear the government only wants to protect some migrants, not all partners of migrants. Which sort of raises the question as to why you're protecting one and not the other, if it really was about protection. In reality, we have trouble seeing this as being about that protection. This is about a push for all employers to be accredited, which is actually something we're not against. Accreditation for employers does lead to employers who should be better employers. They understand their obligations as employers when it comes to migrants. But they could have just been honest about that and stated that and made that the requirement that they were planning about doing that for some time. They've delayed that again for actually all employers till next year. So it doesn't seem to have been a completely sort of how they stated in their release. But that is how it's going to work. So those of you who are currently on a partnership work visa, this doesn't impact you. You're already on that visa. Visa will stay in place until it expires. Those of you who apply before 31 May, the current rules will apply. Those who apply on 31 May onwards, who are not the partner of someone earning twice a median wage or who are on the green list, then these new rules will apply. It means that if you get a job, or you have a job, it must be with an accredited employer paying you $29.66 per hour. If you're already employed and you get a new visa, then employment's going to need to stop unless those conditions are met. Now, as I said, this is based purely on just these documents they've released, which are not worded the best. We will put out a video once we get the full actual final instructions in May into how this is going to work. For now, it's just based on that. So this is our best guess as to how it's going to work. Finally, we're going to look, let's go back to the main camera. Finally, we are looking at the update for the RV21 processing. From our figures, over half of phase 2 applications have now been granted. The rest, the vast majority of the rest at under assessment. Now, of course, phase 2 are those who applied in 1 March. So if you do see the Immigration New Zealand figures, they also factor in phase 1, those from the previous year. So be careful as when you're trying to judge the two different groups. There are different systems, different processes. Now, UA under assessment is taking months for most people. With the current visas we're seeing for our clients are those who went to under assessment back in October or November in 2022. Of course, there are exceptions. This is not a perfect rule as to who's going to be included at what point, but some will fit longer, some will take shorter time, but sort of in between that's sort of where we're seeing now October, November under assessment date coming through now. There are still some sitting at gathering information. Now, for our clients, that is those who are awaiting a national security check. We raised some issues about these delays with immigration. We found out an issue with the process that they were undertaking. And Immigration New Zealand have now changed that process. Now, originally, Immigration New Zealand was handling the requests So there's various stages in an application they go through for each stage. So Get Information may have like 10 stages they go through, and they'll do them in order. So once one was being finished, to start the next, that was finished, onto the next. The issue there was that the police certificate might take several months, as will the national security certificate, national security check. So they were waiting for one to get done, the police certificate, which will take a while, before they applied for the national security check. So the application was made in March, which may have had a police certificate requested in, say, May. That would come back in perhaps October or November, and INZ would then, once it's processed through, apply a request, the national security check, which could take up to 6 months. So what was already a long process got extended further and further. And Immigration New Zealand have let us know they have now changed the system, so in the future they'll be requested at the same time as they should be. But for those of you who are already in the system and are waiting for the NSC to come through, that could be why there is that delay. So it might not have been sort of 8-9 months that you're thinking it's currently taking to do the NSC. It may be a shorter period. They didn't ask for it until much later in the process, and that is causing this delay for so many, especially those coming from China, is the largest group we see who are having this delayed. Now, Immigration New Zealand could have asked them sooner, but they can't escalate the process. It's one of these they will not get involved in. It is it's handled by an outside agency who handle this for them. It's a requirement of the outside agency. So Immigration New Zealand cannot escalate that. There's no point in asking them to. It is just basically a waiting for the process. In the past, we have seen sort of at the 6-month point, they may consider asking questions as to where things are, but in general, they will sit back, let them, the security group do their thing with NSC and wait for it to come back. They are coming back. We did see someone go from gathering information through to under assessment in the last week, and that was when the NSC did come back. So they are coming back. It just does take time. And that is it for today. We'll be back when there is more news. Of course, if you found this video interesting, please do like it. Certainly share it with others who might be able to get a benefit from this. If we can help you with any immigration matter, please email me at the email description down below. And until next time, here kaha, stay safe.